In this lesson, you're going to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty by writing your first bit of HTML. You will learn how to save the HTML as a file and then load that file in a web browser, and thus you will have created your first web page. Our first step is to open a text editor program. If you don't feel like downloading any additional software at the moment, that's okay. Your computer already has everything that you need. If you're using a Windows PC, search through the apps on your computer for an app named Notepad. Or hold down the Windows key on your keyboard and simultaneously press the R key. This should open a run prompt. In the text field, type Notepad and then hit Enter or Return on your keyboard. If you're using a Mac, look in your Applications folder for an app named TextEdit. We should now all be on the same page with the text editor program open and running on our computer. Before we continue, I would like to point out that while TextEdit or Notepad will technically get the job done for educational purposes, they are not enjoyable, dedicated text editors. So I encourage you strongly to perform a search for a text editor that meets your needs and preferences. Personally, I recommend Sublime Text. But you can search the web or ask your friends what text editor is the best for you. Also, even though we are simply typing, we cannot use a word processing program. We need a text editor that accepts 100% plain text. Once we have our text editor open, our next step is to type a bit of code into it. So I will create a heading level 1 element and simply say, this is a test. And then I will close my element. Our next step is to save this as a file. If you're using a Mac and you elected to use the TextEdit app, at this point, look in your top menu bar, click Format, and then click Make Plain Text. The key to correctly saving our file, regardless of what platform or text editor we're using, is to make sure that it is saved with a HTML extension. A file extension simply designates what type of file it is. An extension that we're all familiar with is JPEG. We know that digital photographs are typically saved with a .jpg or JPEG extension. We want our web page to have a .htm or .html extension so that the web browser knows that it's a web page. Having said that, let's begin the save prompt. From within your text editor, click File and then Save. Or you can use your keyboard. If you're on a Windows PC, hold down the Control button on your keyboard and simultaneously press the S key. If you're on a Mac, hold down the Macintosh Command key and simultaneously press the S key. In the field where you can choose what the file is named, type mypage.html. You could actually choose any name you wanted to aside from mypage, but just make sure it ends with .html. If you're using a Windows PC and you elected to use Notepad as your text editor, make sure that the Save As Type field is selected as All Files. This will ensure that your file is saved with the correct extension. Finally, make sure that you save the file somewhere that you can easily find in the future. Once you've chosen an easy-to-remember location, go ahead and save the file, and then, using either Windows Explorer or Macintosh's Finder, go ahead and locate that file. Once you've found the file, open a web browser. Then, click and drag the file, the HTML page that we just created, drag it on top of your web browser. And you will then have successfully opened your first web page. Feel free to make any changes to the HTML file. Save again, and then refresh the web browser, and you can see your latest changes appear right before you. Now that you're familiar with text editors and the process of saving a file and loading it in a web browser, we're all on the same page. This means that you can follow along with all of this course's examples on your own computer. In our next lesson, we'll learn how to create a bulleted list, or more importantly, we'll learn how HTML elements can stack and nest inside one another. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll see you in the next lesson.